There's also something big that I wanna call out that has gotten a lot of attention, but I wanna make sure it gets more attention, and that I've talked about before, and I had, outdoor journalist Wes Seiler, to interview to talk about this, and last week I interviewed former Senator Jon Tester from Montana about this. But the story of the Trump administration's attack on our public lands has gotten even more extreme. What has happened is that we knew that in this budget reconciliation bill that the Republicans are desperate to pass, there was a requirement for the sale of up to 3.3 million acres of land, and that it was mandated in the budget reconciliation bill. And there's any number of reasons why this is simply a handoff to oil and gas, real estate interests, and possibly ranching interests, not least that our public lands actually make money for the American people. They don't lose money. But the idea is to sell these off and use the profits from that sale to pay off the deficit. Theory is that that will be good for the American taxpayer. But the reality is that will take away this actually incredibly valuable set of public lands that do actually produce money for us every year. This would be a one year deal once they're sold off. But also, it's pretty clearly a handoff to big business of American assets. The other thing that I don't like about the sale of public lands is that our public lands currently support small businesses. They support mom and pop industries, and those sorts of industries, especially in rural areas, enable the preservation of democracy because people don't have to work for some company or some mining interest or some real estate firm or in the real estate that it produces. Instead, they have their small organizations or their small businesses that enable them to, support themselves, maybe hire one or two people, and really create the basis for fairness and for democracy. And one of the things that has always happened in the American West is that it has tended to be monopolized by a very few major players who monopolize first the resources and then the government, and then nobody else can get a foothold. And that seems very much what's going on here now. Anyway, we knew that in the bill there was a requirement for the sale of about up to 3.3 million acres of land, an area a bit smaller than the state of Connecticut. But since then, the Senate Energy and National Resources Committee, headed by Senator Mike Lee, who's a Republican of Utah, and the guy who's in such hot water over his making fun of the shootings in Minnesota last weekend, along with Senator Steve Daines, who's from Montana, a Republican from Montana, have added an amendment to the budget reconciliation bill that authorizes the sale of 258 million acres more than that 3.3 million acres over the next 5 years. It includes Bureau of Land Management land, and they manage all different kinds of U.S. recreation areas and wilderness areas and so on, and U.S. Forest Service lands in 11 states. Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. You will notice there that Daines has managed to exempt his own state of Montana, where this is enormously unpopular. But in these 11 states, this would authorize the sale of those public lands of 258 million acres of them over the next 5 years. Now, currently, that does not include national monument lands, and national monuments are lands that have been protected for historic, prehistoric, or scientific interests. So that's going to be, the most obvious of those is the Grand Canyon, although we have many of them. Currently, those are not included, but the Department of Justice under Trump is arguing that a president has the right to revoke protections that have been afforded to national monuments. And the reason for this is because Trump and his people want significantly to reduce the land that people like President Joe Biden put into protection as national monuments. So if in fact they prevail, and there are indications that the Supreme Court doesn't necessarily think that's a bad idea, in fact, these sales could include the national monuments. Right now it doesn't, but they could. And again, this is an issue that I think Americans care deeply about. We do not want our public lands sold off. And yet they're trying to do this under the budget reconciliation measure because they can do it with just a simple majority under budget reconciliation. They cannot do it under the normal procedures of the Senate, where a filibuster could stop something like that. So this is something really important to have on your radar screen and to recognize that it's there. Now, the other thing and the other reason that the administration is pushing the budget reconciliation bill as quickly and as hard as it is, remember they have said they want it signed by July 4th, is because it has significant money in it to beef up the border protection and immigration, customs, and enforcement policies of the Trump administration. Because right now, ICE has spent so much money that it is virtually out of money, which by itself is illegal. You're not allowed to spend more money than you've got in the government. They're not supposed to be able to do that. They're running out of money, and they desperately want an injection of more money so that they can increase the deportations that apparently White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller wants so badly. He wants to have a million deportations in Trump's first year in office, and they're running terribly, terribly behind, which is why you are getting these huge sweeps in which they are threatening people and taking people who are here legally. And today there has been an attack on yet another elected official by agents that appear to be ICE agents. I'm a little vague about that still, because they're all masked and they're not wearing badges and they're not wearing names. So for all I know, it's somebody they yanked off the street. That is something I think we need to clear up. Anyway, the budget reconciliation bill gives ICE and border protection a lot more money than they've got. Significantly, it also dramatically beefs up funding to the U.S. military to almost $1 trillion, or about $1 trillion, which is a significant jump. And as observers have pointed out, right now the U.S. military is primarily involved in attacking the U.S. So that's another reason that they want to get that bill through very quickly. It's probably a very good thing for you to be speaking up against those measures, as well, obviously, as the ones I've talked about so much. The cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to SNAP, the cuts to the clawback of money from the Inflation Reduction Act, and the cuts to energy rebates to enable people more easily to convert to forms of energy and appliances, for example, that are better for the environment.